Southfield right now. So welcome to the College of Architecture and Design at Lawrence Technological University. Welcome to those joining from campus. Welcome to those joining on the YouTube channel as well. My name is Carl Dobman. I'm the Dean of the College of Architecture and Design. We offer a range of professional design degrees in the college that include graphic design, industrial and transportation design, game design, interiors, and architecture. We watch trends, and these trends evolve quickly. We continue to look at the future related to emerging technologies, the professions, and different types of advancements. And we continue to craft an education based on these trends. Our lecture series allows us to engage in design discussions and offer broad perspectives on where we're headed. We're currently in the Constructing Futures exhibition at 1001 Woodward in Detroit. I know that we also have many people watching from elsewhere. This is the second to last event that's happening in this space. The last event will be happening on Wednesday, October 2nd, here at 1001 Woodward, and we are presenting the 27th Annual Distinguished Architecture Alumni Award to Sam Masholi, Project Executive at Fanning Howey. Sam will share a lecture titled Citizen Architect, The Art of Building by Serving Others, and to register for this lecture, please go to our webpage. Today, Michael Sørensen is joining us from New York, and his lecture is Designing Beyond Boundaries. At the end of the lecture, we'll have time for 15 minutes of Q&A, but we're lucky to have Michael joining us today, and even more lucky than I knew because he did come from New York. I also just recently learned that he relocated back to Copenhagen, and so we're even luckier to have him here. He's a partner and design director at Henning Larsen and co-leads the firm's US design studio in New York City. This may also be evolving slightly too as you relocate. With nearly 20 years of experience leading projects from Henning Larsen's offices in Copenhagen and New York, Michael's been at the helm of several notable buildings and master plan projects throughout Scandinavia, Europe, and North America. He led the Minneapolis Public Service Building, a winner of the 2023 AIA Architecture Award, and the Downsview Framework, Canada's largest development winner of the 2024 Canadian Urban Design Award and the 2023 Urban Design Award. Bringing Henning Larsen's DNA to life, he leads co-creative design processes defined by research and dialogue to drive innovative, inspiring spaces and places rooted in the communities that they serve. Michael and I had a chance to talk last spring about design and research related to campus planning. Mary Beth is here who connected us, and so it's nice to bring all of this together. The conversation was amazing, and I think it probably ended with something like, hey, Michael, will you please come and lecture so we can continue this conversation? And so that happens today. I also had a chance to visit the Henning Larsen office in Copenhagen, which was an amazing experience as well. Michael is truly a global citizen. He was born in Australia, raised in South Africa, and returned to Denmark to complete his architectural studies at Aarhus School of Architecture before joining Henning Larsen's practice in Copenhagen in 2006. In 2019, well, this is also outdated now. It's true. In 2019, he relocated to New York, but now there's a new update to that. Having lived, studied, and worked in such diverse cities around the world, Michael's inspired by a uniquely global perspective and deep appreciation of the specific contexts, cultures, and climates that we all work in as architects. Please help me welcome Michael Sørensen.
Okay, thanks for coming, and I hope there's 1,000 people online, 2,000 people online, and thank you for logging in. My name is Michael Sørensen. I'm a partner and design director at Henning Larsen. I'm still heavily engaged in the New York office and the American and Canadian markets, but albeit now just a little bit from a distance between us. I represent a community of designers, landscape architects, philosophers, anthropologists, We work across the globe. Our company was founded in 1959 by Henning Larsen. When I joined the company 17, 18 years ago, we were about 120 people. Today, I think we're something like 600 people. I think that's what happens when you become a global practice and you start opening offices. You can see the map here. We are basically working from east to west, and with offices in very many different locations. And we always work in the intersection of architecture, landscape, and urbanism. And I think when the studio started, it was very much based on architecture, but that has very much blended and is blending even more so now as we're moving forward and face some of the challenges that we all know. So looking at resiliency, looking at how master plans and landscapes have to be performative and work together, and how architecture is evolving as well. Carl, you mentioned you visited our office. We have a pretty robust research and development department in our office. We're fortunate to have a PhD program. And we embed research into all our projects and use that as a kind of starting point for all projects. Whether it's looking at microclimate, whether it's looking at wind, whether it's looking at energy, it's a pinnacle part of the research, of the design process. And I think something that really drew me to Henning Larsen and continues to draw me to Henning Larsen is the fact that I feel we are very contextual in our understanding. We don't come in from a high level with a preconceived notion of architecture or the master sketch and say this is going to be a beautiful building on your site. We're very much about listening, understanding, engaging in dialogue, and then creating something for the place. And I think you see that a little bit in our architecture, because it's very different. You can't say one building necessarily looks like the other. They all try to kind of interpret the context that they are a part of. We published this book a few years ago, and they're all gone, which is good, I guess. We should make a new one. And it says, it begins with curiosity. And I think this was kind of the DNA that Henning himself embedded in the company. It was a lot to do with dialogue. It was a lot to do with talking to each other, understanding, being curious, listening to people, and engaging with them. And I think I did this really stupid search just on ChatGPT, what drives innovation, and the first thing that came up was curiosity. So that was like, oh, okay, maybe that's just ChatGPT, but I truly think we do have a culture of curiosity in our office, and I'm going to show you some projects today where we're kind of pushing that and embedding that into our projects as well. But by being curious, by having access to research, being open-minded, that's kind of what keeps us relevant, but also keeps us moving as designers and keeps us contributing positively to society. Just go through a few projects that we're well known for, just some quick snapshots. This is the Harper, this is a concert and conference center in Iceland, in Reykjavik. We won the Mies van der Rohe Award for this many years ago. And what you don't see here actually is that if you've ever been to Reykjavik, you'll understand that nature is everywhere. It's not a big city, but nature is really everywhere. And what we did with this project was turn it around. So traditionally a concert hall or something would have the view to the sea or to the mountains, but maybe it's everybody's coming now. So we should get them in. What we did here was turn it around, look back at the city, and invite everybody in, and made it so that this building, it's dark in Iceland in the winter. It lights up. It becomes the place where people congregate. They come in here. There's small events. There's also big events, but it really becomes a place for people to meet, much more like a cultural a community center in many ways. This is the Mosgaard Museum. This is an isolated landscape in Denmark. It's a museum of anthropology and ethnology. So basically a lot to do with excavations, hence the form of the building. It's basically a piece of earth that's being lifted up, and the exhibition lives inside of that. But you can go to the roof for free. It's part of the landscape. It's part of your Sunday walk. People are mountain biking down here. They're sledding in the winters. It really becomes just part of the everyday use of the place. And first, when you go inside to the building, you then have to pay a ticket. Another small project in the Faroe Islands, and this is a city hall. It's a very small city hall. It's 700 square feet. It just connects, and the city hall is designed as a bridge connecting two small cities together. So you can literally walk on a footpath over the bridge and then walk to the next city just behind us here. So really, this notion of something that connects together offers itself as something else than just a city hall, but really becomes almost a piece of infrastructure in itself. You can also sit in the chamber hall, and you can see the stream running below you, so you can see the trout and the fish swimming in the stream as well. In France, we did this building many years ago, or maybe not that many years ago, maybe 10 years ago. This is a commercial building. But I think what was interesting for this building is that we managed to convince the client that every single horizontal surface should be greened. Maybe that's not so weird today because we're doing it a lot on our buildings. I think here we were talking a lot about biodiversity, really became important for us, and it's becoming increasingly important in our projects, that not all these green spaces are for people. Some of them are just for species and supporting species and supporting growth of species as well. And we see that coming more and more into our architecture and landscape fusing together in many ways. Mary Beth, you'll know this project. This is the business school of Cincinnati. This was our first project in the US. And for us, it's such a fantastic way of entering the American market and understanding the American market, working on a campus with young people, and the commitment and that kind of requires. There was a lot of work here with creating plazas, making sure that students didn't get run over by buses that were trucking them off. But what we also did here was put up sensors in the building so we can track how people use or how students use the building, so that we can go in and furnish it or refurnish it afterwards. If they're sitting too much alone, we want people to be together. So we're constantly tracking that to make sure that what we promise as architects, we can deliver and keep on going back and delivering. In Minneapolis, you mentioned we won an award in 2023. The AIA were very, very pleased about that. This is a new city hall. It's just adjacent to the city hall in Minneapolis. It's right next to the government building. You'll see the government building here. On the outside, there are no windows. It's just a blank wall. And we wanted to do exactly the opposite. This is about how you engage the citizens of a city and how you make it visible for the citizens of a city that you are serving them and that you are working with them and for them. So here it is really about transparency, about making sure that everybody has eyes on one another, and there's this dialogue between the city servants and the citizens. And just lastly, the two last pictures here. This is a new civic center we're doing in Toronto. It's the Utopic Civic Center, which is a ward just outside of Toronto. And here we really had to study the microclimate to understand how a place like this would perform in the summer and the winter, not from a building's performance perspective, but from the perspective of the plaza in front of the civic center. How can you make this a communal congregation space? If you often go to some of these community centers, city halls, they have these beautiful, big, grand plazas in front, void of people. There's nothing there. So we wanted to turn that a bit on its head. We had created a park. We had to protect it from the winds in the winter, and make sure there's access to sun and daylight in the summer, but also make sure that we have enough canopy so we don't create a heat island effect. So really trying to study that and bring it down in scale, so a different approach to city hall making than usual. And then this site is where we hope to make one of the biggest impacts. This is 500 acres of a development we're working on. We're not doing all 500. We did the framework plan, and it'll be developed in probably the next 30 to 40 years in many districts. It's an old airfield. We are going to be probably between 80,000 and 100,000 people living here when it's fully developed. Because it's an airfield today, you can kind of see it's all mowed. All the water runs off the ridges, runs into the ravines. It floods all the basements next to that. So making that commitment, making that a part of our process of handling all our rainwater on site. We spoke a lot and worked closely with the city of Toronto and moved away from the tower and podium typology and moved way more towards like a mid-rise typology, which is very new in Toronto and nothing they had really done before, but we can get density through that, which also means that we can open up to build, for example, in mass timber at an unprecedented scale. So we're really hoping here that this is going to be a project that will change the way we see development in cities. I think we all know these numbers. By 2050, 70% of the world's population will be living in cities. So there's a lot of work to do in that sector, but especially when you think about that our contribution towards CO2 is about 40% in the building sector. So I think that is something that's, well, I don't think, that is really something that we as designers in Henning Larsen are trying to approach with thoughtfulness and with a commitment to changing our own footprint and the way we work. We recently had an exhibition in Berlin, and that's now traveling, and we're trying to get it around, and hopefully one day it'll be here in the US as well. But it's really about understanding biogenic materials, working with mass timber, working with other materials that aren't concrete, that have a low carbon footprint, and how can they be introduced into our buildings and our building environment and contribute positively. A few years ago, you might know the food pyramid. This is the one we all grew up looking at, and we developed then the buildings material pyramid. And what you really want to do here is make sure that we use as many, just like the food pyramid, use as many materials that are at the base of the pyramid. That's the healthy materials, right? That's the fibers and the vegetables and so on, but that's what's going to contribute to a healthy building environment and a low CO2 footprint. And this was a diagram, the pyramid we developed many years ago, and we've moved on since then, and are looking now at biogenic materials. And it's quite fun to be standing here surrounded by wood. Carl, you were telling me that the wood's going to be repurposed afterwards. You go outside, you see all these artificial intelligence generated images, and just think about somehow high-tech and low-tech and how they meet each other. And I think we are constantly living in that realm, and we can see now that working with biogen materials, there's a lot of low-tech that goes into that handicraft that we're reinventing, bringing back in to the built environment, but it takes technology to do it. You can't do it alone. We are doing a school, you can see on the right-hand side there, at the moment where we're cladding the whole thing with hay. It has a whole beautiful tactile, in the middle. It's a small school we did, and I'll show you an image just a bit later on, but this is with a company that does hay elements, and you can stack them, and they are both isolation or insulation, and they are structural, and it's very, very, very low carbon footprint in something like that. And then some of the other projects we're looking at an even smaller scale, small pavilions, but this helps us to kind of recognize designing for deconstruction in the same way as you're doing this, putting something together that has beauty, that has quality, but that can be taken down, that has a temporary character and can be taken down and reused or repurposed somewhere else. And of course, that idea of designing for deconstruction is something we're then trying to take into our other projects. The project on the right, over there, is that small building I just talked about. It's 2,600 square feet. This is made with those mass hay elements. We were literally on site building it with them. And now we're working on a 1.6 million square foot logistics center where we're working in mass timber and these hay elements. So it's about trying to, take something that I haven't met a developer that says to us, if there's something new on the market, I want to do it. They never want to do it, right? So you have to kind of build in that proof of concept, and that's what we're doing at the smaller scale, but it allows us then to scale it up and really make a huge impact. So these are these elements I was talking about. It's a small firm called Eco Cocoon. I think actually they have a presence in upstate New York as well. And this is a couple of architects hanging out, screwing these things together. You can see here it is very low tech. But you can imagine, you know, you're probably not going to be doing high rises in this, but a lot of different other kind of buildings could be built in this kind of way. So again here, the small school, and then switching to the big logistics center. I was recently, and if you see this is an image of the logistics center. This doesn't look like any of the logistics centers I've seen here in the US. We saw a logistics center last year. They had 100% turnover every single year. So imagine trying to run a company like that. I don't know if the answer is making environments like this, but they're definitely more beautiful than what we saw down there. And I think it helps on that kind of, you know, create healthy workspaces, maybe helps with keeping people in the workplace as well. And I think the beauty about this project as well is that there's a commitment to freeing up a lot of the land and making a beautiful landscape. So really working with water management and biodiversity. 40 acres of the site is going to be like a wild landscape as well. So really walking away from these notions of big white boxes surrounded by parking structures or parking lots to becoming something very, very different. And on top, of course, green facade or green roofs, recreational spaces for employees and so on. So really, again, thinking about a logistics center in a very different way than we're used to. And you know, these are just a snapshot of some of the timber projects we are working on at the moment. We're not only working in timber, and it's not the only solution for low carbon. A lot of our projects are working with carbon curing or hybrid structures and so on, but these are, I think, the first steps, and we can see now that it's moving very, very quickly. I'm fortunate that I get to have one foot in the Copenhagen office, where, you know, no project can get a building permit without doing a full life cycle assessment. Then I'm also working in the US, and I can see we're not there yet, but we are helping to kind of talk to people, to our clients here, and moving the ball just a little bit. I want to show you two projects today, and this one, we don't have so many slides, and then the next one is a little more in-depth, but this is the biggest commercial mass timber project going on in Copenhagen right now. It's 260,000 square feet, and it really has pushed the boundaries of, you know, the fire codes and so on in Copenhagen to get that approved. It's part of a new development, so the white block there is the site, and it's a new development area. You might have seen this, Carl. It's extremely popular, this area. In the summer, it's filled with people along the water, bathing, swimming, hanging out. It's really, really a very nice area. And now we have the opportunity to build the first mass timber project in this area. A lot of it is residential, and this is one of the only commercial projects going on at the moment. We're working closely into the SDGs. That's part of our design thinking and design process of this as well. And you can see here 1,300 workplaces. I think the return to office element that we see in many downtown cores, you see here in the US, we don't have that issue in Denmark. Return to office has never been an issue, and I think because there never was a leaving in the office issue in the first place. So it's a very different mechanism you see in the city. The city center isn't dead like many American cities are. For this, the strategy was very, very simple. It's a pretty big mass. The municipal plan dictated that it should be scaled down, so that kind of gave a very logic to the massing. So it scales up to the north. It scales down towards the south. It's basically a donut, but that's because of the law in Denmark. You have to have dual aspect, and in your workplace you have to have a certain degree of light on every single work surface. So we don't have these very thick floor plans. they're always very skinny, and that allows us to get light in from both sides. So here we have a courtyard in the middle, and you kind of see here the stepping structure as it moves around. The plan you can see here, cores placed in the corners, and then work placed towards the facades all the way around. Some of them have views to the exterior, and of course some have views to the courtyard space as well. And here we kind of see the building going up. Right now it's all packed in plastic, and it's going to be finished in 1 year's time. So super interesting for us because of the scale of this project, especially in Copenhagen, and has kind of opened up for what is possible now to develop in Copenhagen as well. It's not a pure mass timber structure, because that wouldn't be possible. It becomes too lightweight. So we do have 4 cores that are made of concrete. It's piled and anchored, and then we have created a frame. It's a little difficult to see on this render here, but if I take this one, you can see we've created a highway in the middle, which is kind of a mechanical highway, and this is where we feed all our MEP through this space. That's a steel structure, and then that feeds out to the mass, through the steel structure, and then out to the workplaces that are then below these mass timber beams. So not completely a mass timber, but still very, very low carbon footprint for this kind of building. And I think one of the benefits we really see here is the speed of construction. I think we all know how quickly it goes, but also it's a very healthy workplace and a very safe workplace. And the next image here, you see this is the traditional architect hugging the wood, the tree hugger, and there's just a lot of positive energy in wood. And the basic fact, I think, something that we've always also come to realize now is how much we can pull back on finishes and materials. We are using way less paint today. We're using way less gypsum. All this has a count in the carbon accounting. So really working with wood allows us to expose the qualities of that, and really helps us let that be the finished product. As I said, the area is extremely popular. The harbor is clean. People are bathing in this area every single day. The base of this building will be a food hall, so it'll be fully opened to the public. So really thinking about how we interact, and I think that's an important part of how we work in Henning Larsen, is really try to open up our buildings, no matter if it's a commercial space like this, if it's a cultural institution, if it's a school. We're really working with trying to open it up, so it's not just like the people that have a function in the building or a purpose in the building, but really for a broader setup, a subset of society. And again, you see here all the surfaces are green, but that's a demand today from the Copenhagen municipality. It has to be green. So there's also requirements coming to us. We have to have an LCA, we have to have a low carbon, and we have to have an approach to a biophilia. In London, you're working with a bionet gain. So things are moving quickly, and we are also trying to introduce that into our projects in the US as well. And of course, when you work with these kind of products and you don't have the finishes that I just mentioned, it does become a healthy workplace. And that is, I think one of the huge benefits of working in something like that, or in the mass timber. Then I wanted to show you World of Volvo, and this I think we're super proud of this product. Sorry, I've just been with so many asset managers. They talk about assets and products, and it's buildings, but sorry. This is the World of Volvo. This is a Volvo's, you could say, identity building. This is where, if you want to learn about the history of Volvo, Penta Motors, and so on, you would go here. This is in the city of Gothenburg, in the southern part of Sweden, and we were fortunate to win this project, and then had a longer, discussions with them about what they wanted to create. And they wanted to create a landmark that would gather people and would deliver a premium experience, just like their cars do. And then they wanted it to be very, very sustainable. as well. So it is in Gothenburg. Gothenburg is the birthplace of Volvo. This is where they have most of their manufacturing. So all the sites out to the left there, you can see those are all the manufacturing sites, and then the world of Volvo is a little off, but it's on the main entry to the city. So as you drive into to Gothenburg and the heart of Volvo, you will drive past the kind of new headquarters of Volvo. And here you can see the site. There's a small stream that runs just south of the site. There's it's surrounded by factories and some residential buildings as well. So, and also a very big famous what do you call it, amusement park. So a lot of, just not a strictly coherent surrounding, but something that was up to us to try to create something that could tie this place and give it more identity. So looking at, noise pollution, sun exposure, how the wind performs on the site, rainwater and so on, this was kind of our starting point of our design. And just recognizing that we wanted to have a front side all around the building. We wanted it to be visible by people that are driving by on the highway at a very high speed, but also people in the amusement park or on their way to the amusement park that are on foot or just walking their dog in the area. So try to layer on all of those and give them kind of an equal experience of the building. We wanted to create a world, and not just a world inside that is a ticketed experience, but a world that is holistic, both inside and outside, and that kind of talks to what Volvo or how they see themselves. And then of course it had to be an icon. You cannot build something like this and just build a box and get away with it. You need to do something else. The program, I won't dive too deep into that, but really it was about, there's a premium vehicle handover section where if you can order a very nice Volvo online, and you can go to Gothenburg and pick it up and drive around in the Swedish countryside, and they will ship it off. Maybe not the most sustainable way to do it, but an experience nonetheless. And of course they wanted to showcase history, their own history, the exhibition, and so on. In Sweden there's something called Allemansrätt, and Allemansrätt is a law basically that you are allowed to move everywhere in nature. You cannot, if you want to put up your tent on another man's land, that you actually have to be allowed to do that. And that is kind of the freedom to roam. It's a very Swedish thing. We don't have it in Denmark, but in Sweden they're very proud of Allemansrätten. And it's really a way that they kind of see themselves interacting with nature. And of course that became a cornerstone of how we would develop this and think about the journey of being in nature and nature being an integral part of your landscape, of your experience of the building. So Gothenburg is part of the archipelago on the western side of Sweden. So you see here the rocks. It's an absolutely stunning scenery, but also has this richness in the pine trees and the forests around the area. None of them talked anything about automobile, but they all talk about nature and about being close to nature and Allemansrätt. So what we did, and this was the fun part, it was actually two clients. There was Volvo that wanted a brand center, and then there was a city that wanted a parking structure. So we had to, initially we thought we would be doing one here and one there, and then we came up, well, why don't we layer them on top of each other? It's not the easiest thing when you have two clients, but it gave a better building the more forward. So in reality, what it became was a piece of that archipelago, or a piece of the mountain, a piece of the landscape became that parking structure. So you walk up onto this parking structure and you're in the landscape. And then the forest became the building that we placed on top of that. So here in section, you kind of see that you have the highway running past at a very high speed. It's on the northern side of the development. So we're able to slant the roof, so we're protecting from the sun from the south. As you walk through that past that stream, it's at the base of the building towards the south. So it almost there's the stream and the landscape on the roof of the parking structure completely flows together. You cannot see where the one stops and the other starts. So you're freely, when you're walking your dog, you're by the stream, and then you're all of a sudden up on the parking structure, and it's a very seamless interaction. And then of course we wanted to create this notion of visibility, that people walking the dog, people driving at high speed, they have the kind of this experience of a very open building. So the building basically became this landscape parking structure. Parking structure below, and then landscape above, and then we placed what we essentially call the trees on top of that. And here you can see the next image. This is, you're walking now by the stream. We revitalized and renaturalized the stream because it was in a canal before. And now you really have this notion of you're walking in a landscape instead of next to a piece of infrastructure. And here you can really start to see the trees and how they kind of both grow out of the landscape, but the building itself is also one of those trees that you're moving in. The structure for this was extremely interesting, and it's quite fun also to see here and look at this board over here where you used, I'm guessing, some of the same software we did, Rhino, and you sent it to a CNC cutter, and you cut it, and now we're standing in it and built it. It's exactly the same we did here, just at a completely different scale. This is the first time we have worked, well, not the first time, but we worked directly with the manufacturer on this project. So everything we did for the structure was done in Rhino and Grasshopper, and it was sent directly to the manufacturer. And then the manufacturer, they converted it to a program called Tekla, which they could then run their CNC cutting through. So very, very direct interface between what we're designing as architects and what's being cut. And that's without Revit, without that kind of world and interpretation being layered onto that in shop drawings you have to draw up and so on. So it's a whole different kind of interface. We could only do it because we're working directly with the manufacturer, and they're also doing the engineering as well. So that helped in that. So here again, a bunch of very happy architects, because this is the first time they're designing something directly in Rhino and then seeing the product almost literally, not the next day, but very, very close to that. And it again, like the logistics center I talked about and the approach to materiality, when you work with wood, there's so much richness in it. You don't need to layer on all sorts of different materials because it gives you that kind of warmth. So really today, this was some of the imagery we produced from the project when we were kind of trying to convince the client that this was a good idea. And this is the finished product today. And I would say it's pretty close to what we envisioned early on and where it is today. The structural concept for this building is really, really interesting. Because it's a circle, we were able to work with this notion of tree trunks, basically like a table structure. So what we did was place 3 big trunks down. In one of the trunks, we could place the elevators, so we could have our vertical transportation in that. And then in the 2 bigger, we could place some cores that could help us take some lateral movement from either side. And then they were, of course, placed kind of on the midpoints of the triangles, which were tangential to the circle. And then we had another parameter we laid down on ourselves, is that, or 2 parameters basically. We didn't want any columns in the space, so those 3 trunks had to do all the carrying for the building, and we didn't want to have any cross bracing in the facade because we wanted to make it as open as possible, which meant that you get these areas here that are really pulling back, tying back the facade, and I'll show you a little bit on how we solve that as well. So really here, these are the elements of the design. There are 6 main frames that are humongous, that are standing in the legs and then bracing all the way out. And then they're tied together by 3 ring beams. 4 ring beams. 3 of them around the tree trunks and 1 holding all the outer structure together. Then we have 63 frames that come down and become part of the tree trunk and go out and start to define the roof. And they are carried by columns in the facade that both carry those, but then also carry the facade as well. And then we have the structure here in the last diagram here that again attaches to the tree trunks but helps us to carry the load on top of the roof. And the reason for that is that we called it the Easter egg on top of the building. You cannot see it when you're not or from the outside, but as you go into the building you realize that there's a landscape on top. And this was to mimic the northern part of Sweden. The southern part is the archipelagos, the pine trees. If you go to the northern part of Sweden, it's a much more desolate landscape. So this was trying to mimic that part of Sweden. So as you go up there, there's a restaurant and a cafe and a bar. Everyone can go up, and then you're in this bowl of landscape, kind of hidden from the rest of the museum. So basically, this is the simple diagram of the structure. The whole building is 360 feet wide in a diameter, and you can see here the red indicates the 3 tree trunks. The green is kind of that ring beam that is holding everything together, and then the blue are what we call star nodes, and they are doing a lot of work because this is where all the structure kind of comes together, and they're pulling back these beams. This is an engineering drawing of the same thing. It's always full of numbers, 6,202 number of single sticks. None of them are quite the same. Thousands of the same knots and so on. And then you can kind of see here in this drawing how that Easter egg or the canteen sits on top of the building and sits and uses the tree trunks to settle itself on top of that, so driving the forces directly down there as well. And then I thought it was interesting to talk a little bit about challenges as well when you talk about something like this, because it's not always like easy and goes exactly how you want it. One of the things we realized in the design phase was during construction, or not during construction, but during the design phase, we have these beautiful big columns, and we wanted them they're coming up from the tree trunks and going into the roof. And we had created an inner radial on these. And the hope was, as you can see in number 2 there, the hope was that we could create these as glue lamp beams so that they would be completely structural. But what happened, and unfortunately too late in the design process, was we realized that they couldn't, because the radius of the inner fillet was too tight. It had to be 5 meters instead of 3 meters, and we didn't have the time to go in and change that. So the workaround became that it became almost a traditional post and beam structure where they're then tied together. So you can see here how they're laid out in the factory, and then it's basically cut, and all the wood that is cut from that is then used to generate energy in the factory itself to try and minimize the waste from that. So you kind of see here the posts lying down, and then the joints were milled into that, and then on site they were put together as basically a traditional post and beam kind of structure. So you kind of see here the vertical pieces of wood and the horizontal pieces of wood. It's different than we would have liked it to be, but we think still that it ended up pretty nice as well. And we had, of course, we have all these joints in here. It may be a bit hard for you to see, but you can see here some of the ways of, because you're working with wood, you can really repair it in a very invisible way as well. The star nodes, it's a cool name, but they also really cool pieces of engineering. that's a star node. And that's because they are pulling so many forces together. So basically what you see, the blue in the middle is the central piece of steel that's pulling everything together. And it's brackets, so there are hundreds of screws and they're about this long. And they're going into the beams, and this is where 5 beams come together. And then they tie back into the beams and held in this one node here. So you can see on site, that's the area there, and there's no pillars below them either. They're really just tying everything back. And on site, you can see as we're working with these, again, they're milled into the wood, and then they're capped afterwards. So the wood actually acts as a fire retardant. And then only 3 places in the building did we make the structure visible, and that's at the 3 star nodes, because that's cool, right? But you can see from the image before, you kind of see here that we've covered up the rest of the, you don't see it because it's acting as a retardant. Another thing we learned while doing that, or while working on the project, is that the warping of CLT is not that easy. So this image here is an image of our 3D model, and as we're working with the roof and CLT, and you can kind of see all the gaps that didn't work from a rainwater perspective or a water perspective. So what we did to be able to create this curvilinear design was we created some templates in the factory, but every single piece, if I just go back, every single piece of this warp is actually different. So you can't go in and create 300 pieces of template. It doesn't work. But what they actually found out working with them is that they could do very few templates, and we can get it as close as possible to how the final form needed to be. And then on site, they were actually able to drill it down and take the last piece as well. And that's because there's elasticity in wood instead of concrete. So using that to your benefit was also very helpful. So here you kind of see the wood and how it's warped around, and basically it's just forced into place. Kind of if you're like, building your own shed in your backyard, that's how I would do it, for sure. And again here, I just fall in love with this image of this wood and how pure it is, because you're really working with the material and form, but it's also the design and the expression of the building. And here you kind of see that bowl of landscape that's being developed, and then this small pavilion on top. And just moving into the building quickly, just talk a bit about the program and how it's laid out and how you experience the space. This is your arrival. So here you have both, on the one hand, the idea of being within a canopy, within a forest with columns and so on, but also kind of the rocks from the archipelago as well, all coming together. Right in front of you, within this trunk, is the main vertical space. So this is where you go up and down, up to the restaurant. So the plan for this area, you just arrive down here, you go into the main trunk, and you have your vertical transportation, or you start walking around the building. And this is where you would come in and they have a handover experience here. So you can come in if you order a very expensive, I guess, Volvo. You can go here and pick it up. And there's also some event spaces and so on in here. And here you kind of see the layering of both the parking structure below and the experience of this Volvo world on top. So as you start climbing up almost the rocks in Sweden, you have here both, again, the notion of being inside a forest, because the facade is very transparent, because it's very green on the outside. You're really this yin-yang about being both indoors and outdoors, but then it's also a world of cars and trucks and boats and so on. So it's a little bit of a funny dialogue they have with one another. And then moving into the experience center as well. And here you see the vertical elevator that takes you up, kept completely in glass, so you kind of always are in a world of wood more than you're in a world of steel and glass and concrete. And as you move up to the floors above, you can see here then the other circles are starting to emerge now, and and we particularly try to get the passage or the walk up the stairs as close to the facade and close to the landscape as possible. We didn't want everybody to be. We actually did quite a few work to try and hide the elevators, because we wanted people to walk up in this landscape and walk next to the facade and walk next to the landscape. So this would be you walking up the landscape. This is taken just as the building was open, so the landscape's not really green yet. But today it's very green. It's really grown very, very quickly. So when you're walking up here, you really feel that people are walking outside next to you in a green landscape. And here you kind of see the notion of, because we don't have any cross bracing in the facade, it's very transparent. It's a very kind of uninterrupted experience, and really talking about the columns like tree trunks in a forest. And as you move up to the building, you really have this notion almost of sitting below a canopy on the rocks, and being in a forest more than being in a building. Yeah, we also put trees, I don't know. That's funny. And as you get, of course, up to the top part of the building, this is the third story. Now you've really, walked from the stream basically all the way up. This is where you have the main exhibition spaces. This is where you'll have an overview of the park, but this is also where you get an overview of the city. So here you'll be looking back out to the city as well. So you kind of see here as you move up here, again, the very transparent way of looking out. And as you start to populate this with trucks and tractors and boats, this really becomes a story that is very Swedish and very Volvo-esque more than anything else. And then as you move to the top, this is the cafe, the restaurant. People can shoot up directly from below up into this area, and it really is a landscape up there. And again, very different. The only image we have right now is just from the opening, but again, it's much more lush today. And really here you're looking back at the city of Gothenburg, protected and in a completely different environment than what you just left around you. And that was actually my last slide. This is from the highway coming by. I think it has iconic value. When you drive by this, it's something that stands out from the area. So I think this is a beautiful project. I think it's a way that we've reinterpreted context into our buildings and becoming an integral part of the design. And we have a client that is absolutely as well thrilled about what we've accomplished. So, thank you.
Take some questions, I assume, right?
Maybe online.
So we have some time for questions. If anyone's online, you can type them into YouTube, and we can also take some questions here. We already have a question. See how that works? So you mentioned mass timber quite a bit for some significantly sized projects. It takes a lot of timber to build such projects. Could you say something about Denmark's forestry programs?
So the wood we are using in our projects doesn't come from Denmark. It's from Sweden or from Austria or Eastern Europe. Austria is I think well ahead of the rest of the world when it comes to producing CLT and mass timber elements. So a lot of production is done in Austria. And then the forestry is Swedish, Lithuania, and places like that.
Yeah, we had someone that was here who did a project in Portland, and all the lumber came from Austria, and I think there was the forest was getting to its end of its life or something, and so that's why there was a lot of wood available for that.
We've done a couple of projects in the US where we've tried to look at mass timber and the feasibility of it. Often it comes down to a dollars and cents question more than it comes down to a carbon question, because as opposed, if you're holding it up against concrete or steel, the carbon footprint of actually sourcing it in Europe and sailing it is still less than building with concrete or steel. So the actual transportation of it doesn't account for that much less than we actually thought it would.
If you could also go back to your favorite picture of the one that there's a in the exterior canopy along the window line there are some gigantic
Cantilevers.
right?
Yes.
How explain this?
This is, but again, this is the depth of the wood, right? So it's a beam that is this tall. Of course, it's being supported by these beams in the facade here, and then the longest ones, and you have the ring beam tying it all together. So it's like one rigid system, and that allows you to do that. Also, they're going upwards, so it all helps to get those kind of cantilevers.
You also have the surface
Yes. Yes, that's tying it together.
all the way throughout.
Yeah.
Hi. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the deconstructibility of buildings, like where you see the future of architecture going with the life cycle analysis and how you can reuse a building. I think Denmark is way ahead of where we are because it's not a requirement yet. So how do you see that changing?
That's a very good question. How do we see deconstructibility changing with the life cycle assessment of buildings, right? You're right, in Denmark, we're ahead in that regard. We have to do a life cycle assessment for all projects. The funny thing about a life cycle assessment in Denmark, it only takes 50 years, and after 50 years, they assume that you burn the material. So it's a little bit of a weird. So they're working, I think, on changing some of those parameters or measurements criteria. Deconstructibility is really interesting because it forces you to not just think about silicone and stuff like that we're working with today, right? So how do you start to create something that is airtight without using some of these artificial elements? That's where products like biogenic products come in. We're looking at hay a lot now, mycelium as well. So it's kind of there's an industry that's catching up slowly. There are codes that need to catch up slowly as well. And I think for us, the biggest step has been maybe trying to work at it at a small scale, because we're helping inform decisions that are being made both from a policy standpoint, but also from the construction industry. And I think in Denmark, especially, policy is driving a lot. Policy is being tightened every 3 years. So the carbon footprint you're allowed today will be tightened again in 2028. So basically in Copenhagen today, you won't get away with building, if it's a commercial building, in anything else than mass timber at the moment. That's just how tight the policy is. But it's driving change, right? We see here from the US, some of our clients and developers now really opening up to that. Now we're back to the product and the asset, because they're afraid that the product they're going to have in 20, 30 years is going to be obsolete if they don't start. So in this climate here, it's the clients that are driving the change and not so much the policy. So I think maybe there should be some more policy to kind of help drive that.
Maybe a follow-up question too, because when we were in Copenhagen, this discussion of the life cycle analysis came up for all projects. There was something mentioned about that the policy as it is currently will disincentivize double height spaces or atrium to the building because it doesn't have the usage of the space or something like that. Can you explain that?
Yeah, I'm not. Yeah, so you're asking. I don't think your mic works, so I'll just repeat your question. But how? But yeah, how the policy affects the actual design, like double height spaces and so on, and measurement of those. And I have to be honest. I don't know enough about how it actually affects those spaces. So I cannot give you a clear and truthful answer on that.
So it's, can you go back to the last image, which is my favorite image that you glowing city on the hill,
Yeah.
kind of bastion of warmth
Yes.
along the highway. It seems like one of the hidden heroes in many of these projects is glass. And I wonder if you could speak a little bit about how you've gotten glass to align with your values with this in terms of environmentalism, in terms of its embodied energy, its reusability, and its performance in terms of creating an external envelope so you're not wasting cooling.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, this project has a large amount of glass, right? Also, the cantilever is important in this because it helps us with the glare and the heat gain and so on. So that's of course important. I think we always work with high performance facades. So the balance between fenestration, what's open, and what's closed. Not a lot of our projects are 100% glass. A lot of them are actually the opposite. The ratios of 30 to 40% glass, and working with that. I think I won't get into the specifics, like the. Yeah.
Explicitly, it's very easy to understand how they align with your ethos.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
The glass is this kind of, I mean, it's really important in this project. This project wouldn't be the same without it.
Yeah, but also in the Minneapolis, glass was really important, right? And I think probably the ratio there, without it's probably like somewhere between, let's say about 50% glass and 50% closed, right? But there it's important because we wanted to create something that was very different than the surroundings. So we had an old granite city hall on the one hand, that if I'm a citizen, it's almost intimidating to go in there. And then there was the governmental building on the other hand, which had literally no windows. Right, so the ethos there is trying to talk about transparency and accessibility, and making it kind of a gesture that it's open and available to everybody. Glass is not, of course, the only thing we do that with, because a lot of it is about design and space and programming and spatial configuration. But yes, glass is an important part of that. I hope
Well, actually, two-part, but the first one is simple, just a quick question about the exposed timber elements and how the weatherproofing is done in this particular climatic condition. And then the second one is more to ask maybe about what you see architects' roles in process for these projects, especially if you're integrating new technologies, new products, right, that are not typical, right? And this whole kind of role that you now play, both between the clients and manufacturers and things like that.
In a project like this, wood will weather, right? So anything outside will at some point go gray. But I think, again, back to the question of ethos, that is very in line with Volvo and the Scandinavian, Swedish, so I think that wouldn't be an issue. I think if we did that in America, we'd have a hard time. We actually did have a project where we had wood on the exterior, and it was lining some balconies. We didn't get it through, and they wanted us to do vinyl wood, and we said no, we cannot do vinyl wood. We have to figure out something else. So there's always that issue, right? And maintenance becomes an issue, and so on. I think here it's okay. As for the role of the architect, I think it's super fun at the moment because you're creating impact, right? And we're at the forefront of that impact creation. So I think, the more we can take a role in that, the more relevance we have in society today. I think it's great when you walk out here and see all these images that are being created. And I'm not sure if they're all, probably not all by architects. It's all sorts of people, but AI gives everybody, like, you can prompt an image today, right? And you don't have to be a designer to do that. You can just prompt it. I think that's interesting. I'm also a little, like, when I see these images out here, I'm also shocked a little bit about, like, there's not a lot of them that talk about nature. It's very dystopian when you think about it. So the future, if we look at it, and when we discuss it, it's a lot greener than it looks in these images out here. And I hope that's the future, right? We, in the Downsview project we're working closely with the landscape architect. And we've, together with them, it's a Danish company called SLA, they've coined a phrase called city nature, where we're bringing city nature back into the city. It's wild, it's allowed to be wild, but it's embedded in the infrastructure as well. So really thinking about bioswales, but much more from like a natural perspective. And I think that's interesting. Nature, cities are starting to fuse together. Architects, landscape architects, and master planners are all kind of working together. Production is part of that. So it's much more of a collective of people today working together than the master architect saying that doesn't exist anymore. And it's a funny thing. It's this is not a school right here, but we're lecturing at a school, right? And I think it's good to teach students that you're never going to work alone unless you do your own house somewhere. You're always going to be part of a team, and that team is going to be, expanding in the future as well.
Thank you for the presentation. My question was more about the first project you guys worked on here in the US, where you talked about student usage, the data from the sensor, and how that allows for refurnishing. I'm curious how you handle, is this partnership with the owner, and does this give you opportunities for future projects? And is this something you scale across different projects in the company?
Thanks. This project was quite unique because when we were working on the project, we were talking with the Wellness Center. It's at the University of Cincinnati, and talked to them, and they were battling student loneliness at the time. So there was a lot of student loneliness. And when you think about they're living in dorms, and then you go and see the rest of the buildings on the campus, there aren't a lot of spaces for people to congregate that are full of light and so on. They're kind of like leftover spaces. So we kind of went in saying, well, intentionally trying to turn that around, make the heart of the building the place where people come together. There are courtyards inside the building, so you have fresh air, you can walk out. All the balustrades we've been working on, we've been working with, you can sit there and work, because the idea is when you arrive at the building, you look up, you see people, you see faces, more than just people walking by and so on. So did a lot of work on getting people to gather and creating gathering spaces full of light as well. For the data, we then track, we basically put up sensors, the same sensors that we find in cars and so on today. It's all slurred, so there's no facial recognition. But we can track, and we don't know what people are talking about, but we can see and measure how long they are together. So the thesis is, if you are in a distance, and I'm going to have to go to meters now, but if in a distance of 0.5 meter, then you're in an intimate setting, which means you're probably talking about something intimate, familiar. And if you're further away from that, there's a big likelihood that you're working alone. And that's not wrong, but we wanted to just be able to say, okay, if we can fuse enough spaces where people are actually congregating and coming together, there's good peer-to-peer learning there. We are maybe helping a little bit on the loneliness factor, and it's done in a way that we are not intruding on people's private sphere. We don't scale it up into projects. This was specific for this project. So it's together with the University of Cincinnati. And we haven't yet gone in and refurbished anything, so it hasn't given us more work, but that would be the ideal scenario, that if it didn't work, we would go back in and refurbish.
Michael, I want to thank you for joining us today. I think there's a really beautiful balance between both the technology and the kind of warmth of the projects, the positivity of the projects that are there, and I feel like even in recent times we've had people come and lecture and just be like, oh man, it's really tough to be an architect, like, I don't know, and to hear you say like it's an amazing time to be doing this and to be part of these things, and I think the projects that you share are so so valuable and so inspiring. So I imagine the conversation's going to continue a little bit here for a little while, and I know you'll be on campus this afternoon too. So if there are students that are watching, hopefully they say hi and introduce themselves to you when we're there.
Thank you.
No.
We can ask questions at
Yeah,
school then.
we can catch him up at school.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Thanks so much. Thank you.